December 16, 1944. Before dawn, the Ardennes forest is a cathedral of silence. Snow blankets the firs. It's a quiet so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. For the 18 American soldiers of the 394th Infantry's Intelligence and Reconnaissance Platoon, perched on a frozen Belgian ridgeline near a tiny village called Lanzerath, this is just another miserably cold watch. Then at 5:30 a.m., the world tears itself apart. 1,000 German guns open up, a rolling thunder that shatters the winter stillness. The ground heaves. Trees splinter into jagged spikes. The air fills with the shriek of incoming shells and the smell of cordite. This isn't just a barrage. It's the overture to Hitler's last desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. On that ridge, Lieutenant Lyle Boak and his 17 men are staring into the teeth of the German 6th Panzer Army. They are a reconnaissance unit, not meant for frontline combat. Their job is to see and report. But the field phone to headquarters is dead. The line is cut. They are alone. As the shelling lifts, a ghostly silence returns, followed by a new sound, the crunch of hundreds of boots on snow. Through the morning mist they see them. Waves of German paratroopers, soldiers of the 1st SS Panzer Division advancing up the slope. The Americans are outnumbered more than 25-1. Every military textbook says their position is hopeless. Retreat is the only logical option, but there are no orders to retreat. So they stay. Frozen hands fumble with ammo clips. Fingers, numb with cold, find the triggers of their rifles. Lieutenant Boak gives the order, hold your fire until they're in the open. The Germans, confident the barrage has wiped out any resistance, march forward almost casually. The distance closes. 200 yards, 100 yards, 50. Fire! The ridge erupts. The disciplined marksmanship of the small American platoon cuts into the German lines. The leading wave falters, stunned by the ferocity of the defense. They pull back, regroup, and come again. Each time, they are met with a storm of precisely aimed fire. Each American rifleman picks a target, squeezes the trigger, finds another. They make 18 rifles sound like 100. Minutes stretch into agonizing hours. The snow in front of their foxholes is no longer white. This isn't a story of generals moving pins on a map. This is a story of moments, of decisions made in the heart of chaos by people history often forgets. While these 18 men hold a ridge against impossible odds, elsewhere in the forest, the battle's fate is being decided in other small, desperate struggles. Further south, combat engineers of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion are frantically wiring bridges with explosives, their fingers burning from the cold metal of the detonators, racing to deny the Germans the vital river crossings they need. Near Wereth, African-American artillerymen from the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion continue to fire their huge guns, serving their pieces even as German armor closes in around them, refusing to abandon their posts under a rain of steel. In a makeshift aid station, medics and a Belgian nurse named Augusta Chiwi work without sleep, fighting a two-front war against battle wounds and the killing cold, trying to save lives as supplies dwindle. These are the forgotten fronts, the hinges upon which the entire battle will turn. But on Lanzerath Ridge, the fight is personal and immediate. The I&R Platoon repels assault after assault. They feign retreats, luring the SS into killing zones. They conserve every precious bullet. They hold all morning and all through the afternoon. They are buying time, though they don't know for whom or for what. They only know their duty. As dusk begins to settle over the Ardennes, the light fails. The trees become dark, menacing shapes. The cold deepens, biting through their thin uniforms. Ammunition is critically low. Several men are wounded. The Germans, frustrated and furious, are no longer attacking head-on. They are flowing around the flanks, encircling the ridge. The small platoon is now an island in a sea of gray uniforms. The last of the winter light fades. The firing dies down to sporadic shots. And in the valleys below, a new sound begins to grow. It's a low mechanical growl that vibrates through the frozen earth. It's the clatter of steel treads and the deep-throated rumble of hundreds of powerful engines. Peiper is coming. The spearhead of the entire German offensive is arriving at the base of their ridge, and the 18 men are directly in its path. Downriver, the same cold hour ticks by. For Joachim Peiper, every bridge is a lifeline, an artery forward. For the Allies, every bridge is a choke point, a potential grave for the German advance. At the crossings of the Amblève and Salm rivers, the men of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion are the gatekeepers. Under the command of Major David Pergrin, these are not frontline infantrymen. They are builders, now tasked with destruction. On ancient Belgian stone, they stack satchel charges, the canvas bags heavy with high explosives. Fuses are coiled like sleeping snakes, their timers a promise of violent release. Eyes strain, scanning the sharp bends in the river, where the fog clings to the water and the forest conceals the enemy. Every shadow could be a German scout, every rumble a column of armor. These men work with a chilling quiet, the only sounds the clink of metal, the scrape of boots on stone, and the low murmur of orders. They are buying time, one explosive charge at a time. The radio crackles with fragmented, terrifying reports. News spreads like a virus. Villages are being overrun. Mamadi, a name that will soon become infamous, whispered with a mixture of rage and horror. Near Schemberg, the African-American soldiers of the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion are fighting a desperate, heroic battle. Surrounded and outnumbered, they fire their howitzers at point-blank range until the last shell is gone, until their positions are swallowed by the German tide. A handful of survivors escape the chaos. They find what they believe is shelter in the tiny hamlet of Wereth. There, in a snowy field, 11 men from the 333rd will be captured, tortured, and murdered. Their story, for now, is a silent tragedy, lost in the larger storm of the offensive. Their courage and their sacrifice will only be fully understood much later, a brutal footnote in a brutal campaign. But the fear is real and immediate. The reports of these atrocities add a new, dark dimension to the fight. This isn't just about territory anymore. For the GIS hearing the news, it's about survival against an enemy that seems to follow no rules. Back on the Amblève, a new sound cuts through the winter air. It's a rhythmic, metallic clatter and a deep, guttural grinding. It's the sound of 60 tons of German steel. Through the mist, the silhouette emerges. A lead Panther tank, its long 75mm gun pointed like a finger of judgment, cautiously approaches the bridge at Trois-Ponts. For the engineers hidden on the far bank, this is the moment. There's no panic, only a surge of adrenaline channeled into cold professionalism. A corporal hunches over the fuse igniter, his lips moving as he softly counts the seconds. It's a practiced discipline, the heart of an engineer's trade. He waits for the order. The Panther's tracks bite into the road leading onto the span. The command rings out, sharp and clear. Fire in the hole. A deafening roar rips through the valley. The stone archway, which has stood for centuries, heaves upward in a cloud of smoke, dust, and shattered rock. For a moment, the bridge hangs suspended in the air before it collapses into the churning, icy water below. The gut punch of the explosion is followed by a profound, echoing silence. The Panther grinds to a halt, its path blocked. This one act of destruction buys the Allies hours they desperately need. Hours for reserves to be moved, for new lines to be drawn. These small, decisive actions ripple across the battlefield. A traffic post hastily erected by a sergeant reroutes a column of refugees away from the fighting. A captain, given the order to pull back, refuses to abandon 2 wounded men, organizing a litter team under fire. These are the moments that define the defense. But the dread is a rising tide. Peiper is a predator, relentless and cunning. One route is blocked, so he probes for another. Trois-Ponts is gone. But what about the next bridge, and the one after that? He is still moving, still a dagger aimed at the heart of the Allied lines. The 101st Airborne is racing towards a sleepy crossroads town called Bastogne, but Peiper's panzers are chewing up the miles. The next decision, the next blown bridge, or the next one missed, could determine everything. The German tide has crashed against Bastogne and the ring is closing. For most, this story is defined by a single word: nuts. But the real story of Bastogne's survival is written in the blood. Sweat and sheer grit of units often left in the shadows. Before the 101st Airborne even dug in, it was the tankers of the 10th Armored Division, Tiger, who bought them precious time. Their Shermans and light tanks became mobile roadblocks, fighting a desperate, sacrificial delaying action on the roads leading into the town. They bled for every yard, trading steel and lives to slow the German advance just enough for the paratroopers to arrive and form a coherent perimeter. Inside the encircled town, the fight became a grim, street-by-street affair. It wasn't just infantrymen with rifles. The men of the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion became ghosts in the rubble. Their M18 Hellcats, fast and lethal, prowled the ruined streets, setting ambushes, knocking out German armor with lightning-fast strikes, and then melting back into the fog-shrouded chaos. Every destroyed Panther was a victory. Another hour bought, another crack in the German assault. But the true, unrelenting heartbeat of Bastogne's defense was the artillery. It was a constant, thunderous chorus that kept the enemy at bay. And at the heart of that life-saving barrage was the 969th Field Artillery Battalion, a segregated African-American unit whose story is tragically overlooked. From their frozen gun pits, these men worked miracles with their 155mm howitzers. In biting sleet and snow, they executed complex time-on-target missions, where shells from multiple batteries would land on a single point at the exact same second, creating a devastating, shocking impact. They were constantly on the move, displacing their heavy guns under the threat of German counter-battery fire, which relentlessly hunted them. Day and night, their shells arced over the town, breaking up German attacks before they could even form. They were firing for the 101st, for the tankers. For the medics, they were the iron shield of Bastogne, keeping hope alive as food and ammunition dwindled to almost nothing. Their accuracy was legendary, their endurance superhuman. While soldiers fought on the perimeter, a different kind of war was being waged inside a Belgian schoolhouse, hastily converted into the 10th Armored Division's hospital. Here, amidst the constant tremor of explosions and the shatter of glass from nearby shell bursts, Army medics and a remarkable Belgian nurse named Renée Lemaire worked against impossible odds. The cold was a constant enemy. Plasma froze, and blood stiffened on bandages almost instantly. With supplies cut off, every vial of morphine, every suture, was counted and rationed. Surgeons operated by flashlight as the town's generator faltered, improvising with whatever they had to save shattered limbs and torn bodies. Renée, the angel of Bastogne, moved tirelessly through the makeshift wards, offering comfort, a gentle touch, and professional skill that defied the surrounding horror. She was a beacon of humanity in a world of destruction, representing the resilience of the Belgian people caught in the crossfire. The fight for Bastogne wasn't an isolated event. Its survival depended on the heroic struggles happening all across the Ardennes. To the northeast, another desperate battle was raging around the vital road junction of St. Vith. Here, the 7th Armored Division, along with other battered American units, was engaged in a stubborn, brilliant defense that is often forgotten. They didn't just hold. They delayed. They counterattacked. They forced the elite 6th Panzer Army to divert its strength and, crucially, its schedule. Every day the 7th Armored held St. Vith was another day the Germans couldn't reinforce the push on Bastogne. This unsung stand was a masterpiece of tactical delay, completely fracturing the German timetable and preventing them from concentrating their full might on the besieged town. The defenders of St. Vith never knew it, but their sacrifice was a lifeline for their comrades encircled miles away. Back in Bastogne, the pressure never lets up. The cold seeps deeper into the bones. Men struggle to work the frozen breeches of their guns. In the hospital, a surgeon holds the last few ampules of morphine up to the flickering light, making an impossible choice. The sensory details are overwhelming, the acrid smell of cordite hanging in the frozen air, the metallic taste of fear, the gut-wrenching sight of blood freezing dark on a fresh white bandage. The noose is tightening. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the familiar crump of artillery. It's the wail of air raid sirens, a chilling rising shriek that signals a new, more terrible threat. Then comes a different noise from the sky, not the whistle of a shell, but the deep, ominous drone of hundreds of bomber engines. Inside the hospital, the lights flicker, then flicker again. The medics and nurses don't even look up from their patients as the building begins to shake violently. The sound of explosions walking closer and closer, a monstrous drumbeat spelling doom. The smoke and ash cling to everything, a suffocating blanket over the frozen ground. For days, the world has been nothing but gray skies, biting wind, and the unending percussion of artillery. But then, on December 23rd, something shifts. A sliver of blue cracks the oppressive cloud cover. At first, it's just a hum, a distant thrumming you feel more than hear. Then the hum builds to a roar, necks crane upward. The sky, once an enemy, is suddenly filled with them. C-47 sky trains, hundreds of them, dotting the horizon like a swarm of determined dragonflies. And then the blossoming. Parachutes erupt over the snow-covered fields around Bastogne, not of men, but of life itself: ammunition, food, medical supplies. Each descending canopy is a visible injection of hope, transforming raw despair into grim resolve. The siege isn't broken, but the spirit is being mended. Back at 3rd Army headquarters, Chaplain James O'Neill circulates a prayer for good weather, a request from General Patton himself. It's not about divine intervention in meteorology. It's a profound measure of morale, a signal to every soldier that even the heavens were being asked to join their fight. Across the Bulge, the German tide is beginning to encounter more than just desperate stands. It's hitting a wall of ingenuity and grit. At Trois-Ponts, American engineers become frontline ambushers. They don't just blow a bridge. They wait. They let the lead elements of Joachim Peiper's armored spearhead cross, then detonate the charges, trapping the panzers and forcing them into a deadly detour. The landscape itself becomes a weapon. Ad hoc teams of cooks, clerks, and mechanics set fuel dumps ablaze, turning the Germans' precious gasoline into pillars of black smoke. At the village of La Glaise, the mighty King Tigers of Peiper's Kampfrupp, out of fuel and out of options, are abandoned, becoming silent steel monuments to a stalled offensive. Along the Salm River, the veterans of the 82nd Airborne and the 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team aren't just holding the line, they re-counterpunching, digging in with bayonets and sheer will, then launching ferocious local attacks that bleed the German advance one frozen yard at a time. Behind these visible acts of heroism lies a hidden, synchronized dance of destruction. In dimly lit tents and captured farmhouses, the artillery fire direction centers are the choreographers. These unsung officers and NCOs take frantic calls from forward observers, plotting coordinates on maps with freezing fingers, calculating trajectories and timings. Their work is an art form of lethal mathematics, orchestrating the time-on-target barrages where shells from dozens of guns, fired from miles apart, all land on a single point at the exact same second. It's this unseen network that shatters German formations before they can even reach the American lines. And serving those guns under constant threat of counter-battery fire are units like the 969th Field Artillery Battalion. These black soldiers, fighting in a segregated army, coordinate their devastating fire with the besieged 101st Airborne and the 10th Armored Division. Their courage and professionalism, an undeniable fact written in shellfire and enemy casualties. Their contribution is not a footnote. It is a core part of the defense, delivered under the same snow and the same screaming shells as everyone else. As Christmas approaches, the German offensive has been blunted, but the fighting intensifies into a brutal close-quarters slugfest for every ridge and crossroads. The momentum is shifting, and with it comes a new, terrible calculus of war. A final, brutal assignment is handed down, falling to a unit that has fought its way across the battlefield in relative obscurity. The 551st Parachute Infantry Battalion, the WWIIs. Get off your ass. Their objective is the Belgian village of Rochelinval, a heavily defended German strongpoint on a strategic ridge. Taking it is essential to finally breaking the northern shoulder of the Bulge. The men of the 551st know the cost before they even begin. The orders are clear, the mission vital, and the odds staggering. As dawn breaks on a bitterly cold morning, they prepare to move out. There is no grand speech, just the quiet sounds of gear being checked, weapons being loaded, and a few last words exchanged between friends. They are stepping off into a landscape of white fog and swirling rifle smoke, walking toward an objective that everyone, from the battalion commander down to the newest private, knows will cost them dearly. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't one single fight, but 1,000 smaller ones. And as the tide began to turn, some of the fiercest were still to come. The Allied counterattack was on, but the Germans weren't just giving up ground. They fought for every village, every crossroad, every frozen inch. And on January 7, 1945, the men of the 551st Parachute Infantry Battalion faced their ultimate test, the village of Rochelinval. Their objective was a key crossing that would help break the back of the German salient. The cost would be unimaginable. Imagine this, knee-deep snow, so thick it feels like wading through concrete. You're in the open, and the air rips apart with the sound of German machine guns. The 551st charged across that deadly ground. Squads that started with 12 men were cut down to 3 or 4, but they didn't stop. They reached the first houses, and the fight became a brutal, intimate struggle from building to building, room to room. By the end of the day, Rochelinval had fallen. The crossing was secured. But the 551st Parachute Infantry Battalion was shattered. Of the over 600 men who started the attack, only about 100 were left standing. Their sacrifice was so great, their losses so total, that the battalion was quietly inactivated shortly after. Their heroism was almost lost to history, a footnote in the grand narrative. It took decades before their incredible stand was finally recognized with a Presidential Unit Citation, the nation's highest honor for a military unit. And as the 551st paid the ultimate price, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place across the Ardennes. Joachim Peiper's formidable panzers, the spearhead of the German assault, were found abandoned in the village of La Glaise, out of fuel and out of time. The critical St. Vith corridor, a lifeline for the German army, was finally squeezed shut. And to the south, the siege of Bastogne was broken, as Patton's Third Army punched through to relieve the battered 101st Airborne. The Bulge was collapsing. This series was never about just maps and arrows. It was about the people. People like the 394th I&R Platoon, whose brave stand at the start bought a priceless day. It was about the 291st Engineers, who used their knowledge to turn frozen rivers into impassable barriers. It was about the 969th Field Artillery and their brothers in arms, whose precise calculations and raw courage held St. Vith against impossible odds. It was about the medics, and about nurses like Renée Lemaire, the angel of Bastogne, who gave her life tending to wounded soldiers when her aid station was bombed. And it was about the men of the 551st, who walked into the fire at Rochelinval to cross that final, deadly threshold. We remember the Wereth 11, the African-American soldiers murdered behind enemy lines, now honored with a memorial standing in the Belgian snow. Their stories and the voices of the veterans who carry them are fading. But they are not lost. History is not just made by generals. It's forged by ordinary people who, when tested, do extraordinary things. Thank you for joining us on this journey to remember them. If you believe these untold stories deserve to be heard, subscribe to our channel. We're dedicated to restoring the names and faces to the margins of history, one story at a time. Thanks for watching.